Hey, I'm Nikki, and this is the importance of divulging more diverse stories on your tours. One of my favorite tours that I used to give was the Statue of Liberty back in my guiding days. And usually, for the company I worked for, I would have a group of American tourists, first time in New York City, and they really just booked to, get that Instagram photo of them with the statue behind us. So their expectations are pretty low. Just fun, enjoyable day on the water, maybe a few historical facts about the statue. Not the tour I delivered. When I was preparing to give this tour, I read a book about the sculptor's journey to build the Statue of Liberty. I highly, highly recommend it. It's called Liberty's Torch, The Great Adventure to Build the Statue of Liberty by Elizabeth Mitchell. And it's a very interesting read, but it perhaps gives a less noble purpose to this iconic statue. So on my tour, careful to be out of earshot of park rangers who are a bit more conservative with their learnings, I would regale guests with the somewhat tragic story of a total mama's boy who really wanted to build an epic statue at whatever cost. A symbol of liberty and the American dream, that came well after the statue had been erected. I would also introduce my guests to the Statue of Liberty's maintenance man whenever we passed him, who had the most amazing title of Keeper of the Light, as he was the sole person with keys to the torch, which most people didn't realize has been closed to the public since 1916. So it was just amazing to me that this one man held the keys, to this iconic spot. My groups would always want to take pictures with him, and he was very generous with us, even though it was quite clear we were interrupting his work. He'd have his tools or his broom that he'd have to put down to take photos with us. Having been educated myself in the United States, I can tell you that the story that I shared on Liberty Island was not what I was taught in school. Which was a very watered down, idealistic, romantic vision of this statue. I would often get school-age kids on my tour, and I would encourage them to go back and harass their teachers with this radical knowledge, right? And I hope they did. And that whenever the statue came up in the future, that they would remember these things from this tour and kind of be excited to share this alternative history that you don't normally hear about. Tour guides have a power. I'd even argue a duty to share the true stories of their city with travelers, the good and the bad. And I've spoken a lot before about this importance of a tour guide's job, but in this article, I will outline different ways that tour guides can source and add into their tours more diverse stories in history. Let's take on the responsibility and raise the bar for all tours. Why not, right? So, how to source and share more diverse stories on your tour. They say, history is written by the victors. And it's hard to argue that the most popular history is written by or from the perspective of Western white males, right? Or at least it was. But here's the thing. History is constantly changing. And what we thought we knew can be challenged and rewritten. All it takes is a little bit of time and research. And it's not your duty as a guide to uphold the traditional history. It's your duty as a guide to give the truth and the facts as much as you can, right? So I would even argue that everyone's already heard this typical history. So why not surprise guests with a fresher take, right? It's our job to educate them about our cities and help spread the word from a local's perspective. Who said tour guides can't be on the cutting edge of history, right? So, 2 tips. Number 1, diversify your sources. I feel like every guide has their go-to history book. Just do a quick check. Are those books all written by a certain gender? Or maybe all those books are written before the 1970s? You don't have to throw out your favorite classics. Just add in some variety. Look up books on the history that your tour touches upon by women or minorities. Find recent movies and television shows geared towards communities that you aren't a part of, but that exist in your city. Granted, this is harder for sure, in some countries, some cultures. But if you do enough digging, there are always some small communities you can find that are already doing this research. 2, diversify recommendations. Too many tours rely on the standard list of well-known or vintage recommendations that travelers have seen in movies, right? Classic museums such as the Met in New York City or the Uffizi in Florence, or restaurants that serve up traditional fare. But again, modern day culture is just as important to a city's character as its history. So don't throw away the old recommendations. Guests still want them, but just mix in some new to educate your guests. You can source this by doing a local search of minority-owned businesses or immigrant-run restaurants. I highly recommend Unearthed Women's Feminist City Guides. It's a great resource. Or look for niche museums that you can recommend, like the Colored Girls Museum in Philadelphia. Tying all this together to show history's effect in shaping the modern day culture of your city makes for a more relevant and much more impactful tour that your guests are going to remember.